everybody, and welcome to Character Interview. My name is Silver Fox. You should know that because of the channel. Don't mind me, I'm nervous. And today we have a new character with us. So would you mind introducing yourself?
I'd be more than happy to. Greetings, mortals. My name is Galavyn. You probably are more familiar with me by my more official title, the Archangel of Stories, but I'm through with the formalities for this particular occasion. You can just refer to me by my name if that's what's comfortable to you.
I think I'm gonna stick with the Archangel of Stories since I can't really pronounce the other one.
That is all right.
So, why don't you tell us a bit about where you're from?
That is a difficult one to answer because I really do not have a place that I came from. I suppose the best way to describe it would be a void of nothing. But I have a library that I call my home, I guess you could say. A library that contains all the stories that I have written over the many, many eons of my existence.
That actually brings up a question. How long have you been around for?
That question is like asking how long is a piece of string. It all depends on who you ask. If you were to ask me, though, well, I'd say the simplest way to explain it would be I've been around since the beginning of time, possibly even before. Again, it's all a matter of perspective, I suppose.
So you said you were born from the void. Do you have a place you call home now?
As I say, I have the library that I use to curate all of the stories I have written over my many eons of existence. I don't actually have a home in the mortal sense. The library is my sanctum, I suppose. A place that I go when I need to get away from things.
So it's your safe place.
I suppose that'd be the best way to describe it, yes. Safe place, a haven, sanctuary, whatever word you wish to use to describe it.
You said earlier that you've been writing stories for a long time. What kind of stories do you enjoy writing?
It really depends on the mood I'm in. Sometimes I write stories about great heroes and battles fought eons ago. Sometimes it's a story that might send chills down the spine or invoke horrors long forgotten. Sometimes it might just be a simple story about love or finding some measure of happiness in one's life. Again, it's all entirely dependent on my mood and whatever inspiration comes to me.
So is there anybody you have in your life that you're close to or that you have a strong relationship with?
Hmm, that's a interesting question. I suppose the answer to that first part of the question would be, well, Yofi, as you and every other mortal here might know her by, the artist. As for anyone else, not really. Well, actually, there is one, a creation of mine. Um, Sarafina. She was an angel that She was a angel of purpose that I created. She lost her way and couldn't find a purpose in her existence, so I took her under my wing, and she essentially has become my apprentice. But that's about it, I suppose.
I mean, both of those people seem, or at least sound very nice.
You could say that. Sarafina is very driven, as befitting of what she is. And while Yofi is a bit of a chaotic individual, she definitely means well.
I hope you won't find this particular question too much or too intrusive, I guess, but from a couple friends of mine, one you might know by the name of Grace, there's been a situation going on with other characters. I believe it's the ARG.
Yes, I know what you're talking about. That little game between Yofi Aldor and the shadows.
From what I've been told, it's been quite difficult to deal with.
Certainly for them, yes. Yofi and Aldor haven't exactly been taking it very well. I suppose I've been taking on the role of a passive observer of sorts. That doesn't mean I haven't tried to intervene or get involved in my own ways, but given the fact that I don't have a strong connection to this narrative in the same way that they do, I can only do so much. It's rather difficult, to say the least. But I do what I can from the outside.
So it's kind of like being put in a story that you're not exactly part of.
That's actually not a bad way of describing it. This whole game, this narrative, or whatever they choose to call it, I've heard multiple names for it, but it's like a story without an ending. It just keeps going. No matter what you try to do to put a stop to it or end the story, you never seem to quite get there. And every time you think you have gotten there, the goalpost just moves further and further away. Do I ever think it'll end? I'm not sure. It does go against my very nature, because I believe that all stories should have an ending. But after seeing everything that's been transpiring as of late, I may have to rethink my perspective.
That must be really hard to have to accept something that goes against everything you believe.
Not just everything I believe, but my very existence. My existence is to create stories, to write. And all stories have to have a beginning, and they have to have an end. A story without an ending really is not a story. It's just an endless march into nothingness. And eventually, there's no point to it. You lose the intended meaning. You forget the intended message of the story. And at that point, you're just writing for the sake of writing. And at that point, there's no meaning to it. There's no drive. You lose all sense of purpose. Just like Sarafina almost did. It's messy, this whole situation. But as someone who's not part of the narrative, at least not in the same way that as Yofi or Aldor or the Shadows, then what else can I do? Not much.
Well, the way I see it, even if you aren't part of the story, you can at least try to help where you can, and you seem to be doing a really good job at that.
Most of my involvement recently has been trying to keep Yofi stable. As difficult as that has been, given her chaotic nature, but I somehow manage it. With some help, of course, more from Sarafina, but I've made it work. I tend to, although I also know that sometimes it's best to keep my distance. And when that is necessary, I just simply retreat to the library and continue to write, create new characters, that sort of thing.
Well, in my eyes, that just proves how smart you are, because we can't always fight battles that we see. There's only so much we can do to help others, and sometimes we just have to stand back.
I suppose that's why Yofi and I get along so well. She's the chaotic, creative artist, and I'm certainly a lot more logical. I tend to actually think about things before I commit to an action. We
I
have
mean,
butted heads about it occasionally, but that's that just happens.
we all need a little dose of chaos in our lives every now and then.
That is true.
So, do you have anything else you could share with us about your world or your life that you feel comfortable with?
There are many things. I will admit that some of the stories I've written, the characters that I've created, some of you might be rather familiar with. For instance, certain dark elf, Lorian, I believe if I remember correctly. Yes, Lorian. Perhaps one of my more prized creations. Not just Sarafina was not the only creation that I value. He's probably one of the ones I value the most because, well, he was one of the first. One of the first that I gave a story. And it's been interesting seeing how his story has developed over time. A lot of things have changed about it, but I am happy with the outcome. Has it ended yet? No. To be honest, I'm not sure how I want it to end. I want to see where it goes. And every time it seems like it wants to end, something new comes along and completely changes things. But I just let it run its natural course. As I say, sometimes you just have to let things go the way they go. You never know where it might end up.
That's honestly probably a philosophy I should probably start adapting into my own life.
I think it's a lesson that a lot of people need to learn. Sometimes things just happen. I mean, take this game, for instance. Some of the things that have transpired throughout it, I doubt we could have stopped. But I feel like they were necessary. Sometimes you just have to see where it goes.
I mean, it's not like we're future tellers or anything. We can't predict what's going to happen. We can just roll with the punches as they come.
That is very true. Although, I wouldn't discount on the fortune teller thing. There are such things as fortune tellers or those with the power of foresight. In fact, one of my creations has that very gift, though she can only see so much, of course. Or to be more precise, she can only see what I let her see.
Well, I mean, even for those who can see the future, it still can't always prepare us for what's going to happen. We can try, but in a lot of cases, we just end up meeting our own destiny by trying to avoid it.
Future is clouded and uncertain after all. You may be able to see multiple paths, but you never necessarily know which one is the right one. It's all a matter of perspective, really.
Honestly, hearing about all this stuff, it's actually really interesting. I don't get to hear about other people's characters a lot, so hearing about other creations and other worlds is something I really enjoy.
I may be a creator, but I am not the sort to hide the secrets of my creations. I'd rather I'd rather that people know as much as possible about them so that they can draw their own conclusions. If they don't like the creations I make, so be it. That's not for me to decide. There are, of course, some creations that I have chosen to keep secret, but I've kept them a secret for very specific reasons. There are certain things about my stories that I do not wish to reveal just yet. In due time, that will come to the that those secrets will come to the forefront, but but it's only a matter of time before it does. I believe in certainties after all.
About what you said about not really caring if other people enjoy your creations or not is that's kind of a philosophy I try to adapt into my own life with the characters I create because you can't please everybody. It's literally impossible. There's always going to be somebody you're probably going to upset, and trying to please everybody just isn't going to work.
And that's a good mindset to have. I mean, like you say, you're never going to please everyone. You're always going to have your critics. You're always going to have those who doubt your creations. At the end of the day, you shouldn't let them get to you. Just move on. Take life as it comes, and life will find a way to reward you. Of course, for someone for an entity like myself, I tend to make my own luck, as it were, though not often, only when I feel it's necessary.
If only I had that kind of luxury of even remotely being able to create my own luck.
I'm sure everyone has it. It's just all in how you actually, in how you actually interpret luck. After all, everybody views luck differently. And I know you mortals often refer to it by different names. Karma, for one thing. That is a term I still don't fully understand. You mortals are so
I don't think
confusing.
Even some of us mortals understand the term exactly.
You mortals continue to surprise me.
I mean, the only reason I even remotely bring up my curse of luck is I have what I like to call the black cat luck. It's just sometimes, and more often than not, when I cross paths with another person, there seems to be something that always ends up going awry.
That makes sense. I suppose that would partially explain the, well, I'm not sure whether to refer to it as the darker side, right, that I've seen with you. That sort of black cat-like creature. What was her name again?
Oh, her name is, well, she prefers to be called Queen Shadow, but really, she's just a dictator with a bloated ego.
Ah, cursed with the sin of pride. I see.
Yeah, pride and I guess a bit of envy or jealousy because she doesn't take too kind when other people start stealing her power.
Well, she certainly wouldn't like me then.
She doesn't really like any creations or creators. She sees them mainly either as pawns in her game or just things to stand in her way to destruction. So,
I am not going to lie. I would be curious to speak to her. That certainly would be an interesting conversation. Though again, I doubt she would like me all that much.
well, if she ever takes over again, maybe I can find some way to take a bit of control so you two can meet, but I will be warned, she can be a bit much at times.
Trust me, I have dealt with far worse. From what I've seen of her, she'd mean nothing.
So, from what I heard, she actually for once connected with a creation, which that's a rarity I never thought would happen to her.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, somebody by the name of Amasha, I believe. She came in for an interview while Shadow was in control, and she actually enjoyed talking to her.
I'm sorry. Who did you say?
I believe the name was Amasha.
That, hmm, that is interesting. I have to admit, I am quite surprised, considering who that creation belongs to.
I'm hoping one day maybe I can meet Amasha in person, but we'll have to see how fate decides to deal me my hand.
I mean, I'd have to speak to her creator, but I'm sure I could arrange something.
It'd be nice to talk. Again, I really love learning more about creations or creators, their worlds, their universes. It's all really interesting to see what different people from different places can come up with.
I'm sure still got many burning questions for me in that case.
Yeah, but I'm not exactly sure how to put them into words.
That's alright. One thing I have the luxury of is time.
I guess one of the biggest burning questions I've had is how did you meet Yofina?
Um, that is just a that is a rather interesting question. I'm I suppose the best way to describe it would be that while I was writing one of my stories, I guess I stumbled into, well, we call it the abyss. It's a place that her and I sort of coexist in. A place where our little sanctums, my library and her little sanctum, can be in one place, and therefore we have easy access. And I guess I stumbled into her part of the abyss once, and that's how our paths crossed. It was a interesting partnership to start with. She was definitely curious about me, I'll say that. And I won't deny that she certainly intrigued me. However, our relationship has changed since then. Certainly for the better.
Well, I'm at least glad you got to meet somebody. As much as I love the friends I have made and I'm really happy for being close to them, it's sometimes hard since, well, I have my life to live in my normal world, but I also have my job as a multiverse protector to take care of.
Multiverse protector? That's a new one.
The best way I can explain it is it's my job alongside a few other people who don't exactly belong to a universe to protect every universe from outside threats who might want to destroy it, aka Shadow.
I see. I suppose the shadows in the game are a part of those threats.
Yeah, it definitely gets tiresome, especially when you're constantly hopping from universe to universe. But it is nice to meet, well, the different people you meet in every universe, and they all have their own stories to share.
I suppose you could say that I have a similar sort of gift. Not to travel to through a multiverse, so to speak, but the world I've the world I've created that serves as the basis of all my stories. I I have the capability to travel amongst it in a different form, of course. I don't know how the creations of my world would really take to seeing an entity like me. They'd probably just assume I was another angel of the heavens or something, but it's much more comforting for me if I take on a more human guise, or at least a more mortal guise. But I often travel into my own world and wander under its many streets, eats, and forest paths, just to see how it's developing, how each creation's story is unfolding.
It must be nice to just relax sometimes and just watch your creation stories unfold.
It is certainly a unique kind of catharsis. I suppose that's why I enjoy it so much. Seeing it all unfold before my eyes is it's rather breathtaking, I suppose.
I mean, as much as pride is seen as a sin, it's still good to take pride in the work you've done or whatever you have created because it's nice to sit back and look up where you came from and where you've gotten to now.
I think that's the main problem. Most people interpret pride as a sin, but pride is only a sin when it's used to justify less than pleasant actions. Taking pride in one's work is by no means a bad thing. But you can, of course, go too far. It's all dependent on what and how far you're willing to go with it. Same with all the other so-called sins. Envy, greed, they're only sins when you push them too far. If you're willing to set a boundary for them, however, then they're not sins, but virtues. Creation is a funny thing. It's, well, to use an analogy that's close to my way of thinking, creation is very much like the blank, like a page in a book. Without words, it's just a blank page, devoid of meaning and purpose. It's only once you actually put the words to paper that something actually comes of it. Or to use an analogy that would be more close to Yofi, I suppose, it's like a blank canvas. It's only when you start applying the paint and the color and the various shades of color that you find the beauty in things.
It is true, and I feel like for a lot of creators, myself included in this, we tend to give up or think we messed up so early on without giving ourselves a chance to fix or edit it and just consider that the end when really that's not the case. We just need time to fix it.
And of course, there are certain mediums that are easier to edit than others. Story writing, for one thing. It's much easier with a story to go back and change things. It's a lot harder to do if you're speaking it, of course. If you're narrating the story to someone, especially in front of an audience, because if you backtrack, you look like a fool. Whereas if you've written something down, or even drawn a picture, you can always erase the things that don't work, the details that feel out of place.
It's honestly kind of odd in a way about, at least in my universe, how words literally can be used for good or for evil. There are those who train themselves in the way to enchant with healing spells or use their voice as an attack. But there are also those who learn to turn their words into literal venom. It's honestly surprising what exactly words can do to anybody.
I don't think it's restricted to just your world. It's true of everything, really. I mean, my world, in the world I created, for instance, some people have the capability to use their words to literally change the fabric of reality, to warp and twist it into something that benefits them or a group of people close to them. I suppose you could call it magic or psychic power, but, well, I suppose that's really the only accurate description for it. Words have power, no matter what medium you use to generate the words, whether it be written or spoken. Even a simple little word or a simple phrase could change the world.
And for good or for bad, well, that's up for the person who is speaking to decide.
Precisely. Even the most charismatic individual still has a dark side, and if they use their charisma and great speaking ability for evil, well, I would say they've only got themselves to blame, but fate has a funny way of working things out, I suppose.
Okay, no matter what world you live in, no matter how you choose to describe it, is an oddity for sure. Because, well, oftentimes people will use fate when really it's only their own consequences bringing them to the place they are now, whether it be good or bad.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Some people though do try to change their fate, for better or for worse. But what can you do to change it? In all honesty.
It's kind of like how I like to see destiny. You can choose whether to believe it or not, but even if you have tried to change your path or your way or destiny or whatever you decide to call it, you're still gonna end up going down that path because that's just kind of where you're heading. That's the choices you've made in your life that have led you to that decision. And sometimes you can change it, but other times you end up just making it come even faster than you wanted it to.
And sometimes you just have to you have to go along with it. Move on and let fate run its course. The story has to end eventually. But what you do before that story ends is up to you, of course.
It's kind of like our legacy in a weird way. The story we write ourselves of how we've chosen to live our life. It's bound to end eventually, but we can decide how we keep the story going and what we choose to be remembered by.
I must admit, for someone who sounds so young, you are certainly wise.
Wise as I may be, I will admit a couple of the things I've said here today, I'm pretty hypocritical on myself.
That, that may be the case, but I've always found that hypocrisy and wisdom kind of go hand in hand. Not always necessarily for any sort of positive gain, but it does happen.
Easy to give advice, but hard to give yourself that same advice.
Sadly, I am all too aware of this.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I suppose the best way to explain it is that I tend to be far too logical at times. The only time I ever really pour any emotion into anything is when writing my stories. Most other times I tend to be quite cold and calculated, I suppose would be what the term that you mortals would use to describe me. But people have tried to tell me that I need to stop that or cut the act, as it were. And I've tried, but like a story without an ending, it goes against my nature. So I've learned to accept that some things about myself I just can't change. But I take it in stride.
I mean, you can't just change yourself just all of a sudden. It's impossible. You can try to improve on some things, but you can't always change the way you are. I mean, I'm constantly anxious about everything, and while have found good coping mechanisms to help with that, that still doesn't mean I'm never going to be anxious again. That'd be asking me to change who I am as a person, and that's not fair.
And I don't think anyone would want you to change, in all honesty.
Well, I know there are some things I definitely could improve on, but I'm still thankful for the people I do know who love me for who I am, despite me being absolutely chaotic and insane at times.
As you said earlier, sometimes we need a bit of chaos in our lives.
True. Otherwise, they would be a little bit boring at times.
Indeed.
Well, I'm afraid this is where I have to take my leave. I have other things I must finish tonight before I retire and decide to actually get a decent amount of sleep.
I sometimes envy you mortals for that. I, being the entity that I am, don't really understand the concept of sleep. While it does allow me to get more done, it's it would be nice to know what it'd be like to dream.
Well, if I'm being honest, I don't think a lot of mortals truly understand it either. Considering I know several people who have refused to sleep just to try to get that little bit more work done.
That is a good point, I suppose. Sadly, I will also have to take my leave. I have left the library unattended for too long. So this is where you and I will part ways for now.
Hopefully,
Perhaps we will be able to speak again on more, well, when this game is finally over. We might be able to speak on more positive terms, I suppose.
well, I must say, I wish you the best until then. And it honestly was a joy to be able to talk to you.
And it was a pleasure to talk to you as well. I must admit I wasn't initially comfortable with this idea, but I've warmed up to it, I suppose would be the best way to put it.
Well, I'm glad I at least could make it somewhat enjoyable. And to any creations or creators who might be watching this video, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this kind of stuff, then leave a like and let me know if there's anybody you think I should try having a character interview with in the future. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more like this, and just remember to keep yourself safe because somebody out there really does care about you. With that said, I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!
Farewell.